And I'm going to give a program and a presentation on Anna Marks, Another Look. Now, what's that about, another look? Well, really, my friend Marty Lester, and you will see her in an image, I think the next one, she and I came across this Anna Marks collection of pictures some 15 years ago, and we used quite a number in a book that we put out. And so we presented previously and we've shown a lot of Anna pictures in our presentations that we gave on our book. There's Marty and I, 2012, and our book has just come out. And so this set the stage for, I think, 3 or 4 years of presenting our book all over Butte County, showing people pictures from our book. And of course, the Anna Marks pictures were in there considerably. And also, we gave an earlier program right here at the Chico Museum, I believe before the virus era, on Anna Marks. So again, this is not the first time that I've used Anna Marks pictures to really provide a focus for a program. But I'm going to give it another swing today because I really like these pictures. And why do I like them? Well, hopefully there's a touch of entertainment value in them, yeah. We just casually look back and are entertained and amused there by how things used to be. But again, I think there's an enormous value, a cultural value to looking back, and maybe especially at this time that we all find ourselves in, where our country and our world even seems to be adrift in a whirlwind of change that none of us really have much understanding or control over. And so I think there's an enormous value in looking back from where we are now to try to better understand how it is that we've come into this place today where we all live and a world that swirls about us. And so again, I find these pictures hopefully illustrative of the American story as it's played out over the last 100 years, and maybe that can give us not only some understanding, but some appreciation for what we have now, how it might have come to be the way it is outside these doors. Okay, so yes, you see Marty and I standing here 2012. The story of our book had really started about 3 years before. I had gone up to Forest Ranch to give a program there at the Forest Ranch Community Center on the history of Forest Ranch. And my dad, John Nopel, had been a superstar there at the Forest Ranch Community Center for decades. His family had been up in Forest Ranch 1889. He knew all about Forest Ranch and had been a presenter there at the community center a number of times. I had taken him up there. I had heard all about it. I had seen the pictures since I was a boy. And now he had left all that stuff to me, his pictures and his paper. And so they asked me to come up, and it went really well. And this person, Marty Lester, who lived in Forest Ranch, stepped up to me and said, "Hey, you ought to write a book on that." I don't know how to do that. I don't know anything about the computer world. Well, she would really take the reins. It was Marty who really navigated all of that communication between publishers, writing all the material, doing the scanning, the computer work. I had the knowledge and the pictures and the contacts, and we put our book together. It would be, I'd say, early Marty had come over to my family's house on Downing Avenue there, I'd say 3 years prior to that picture. She had come over to look at my dad's material and his pictures and all of his stuff. And then after we looked at that material, we went in. My dad had passed away, I think, about 3 years earlier. My mom was still alive. We sat down next to her and asked her, "Do you have any recommendation for who we also might talk to as far as finding new pictures and information for a book?" And she would say, "Well, I think you should go and see the Anna Marks photo albums." And so she directed us to contact a person right here in Chico, and we went over to her house one evening and sat down at her dining room table, and here these photo albums and scrapbooks were put in front of us. And the very first album that we opened up, oh my golly, there was a beautiful picture of a car on the Humboldt Road that you will see later on in my program. So, we, again, my dad, I think, has the most pictures from his Nopel collection in that book, The Humboldt Wagon Road. Anna Marks, and her pictures are right behind. I think we used nearly 20 Anna pictures in our book. And we slowly learned about Anna Marks. And here she is in 1905, here in Chico. She had been born in Pennsylvania in 1886, and then just 2 years later, her father and mother would bring her family to California, 1888. They would come first to Los Angeles, and then in 1900 to Santa Ana, and then in 1904 to Chico. So here's Anna. Here's her mom and dad, I.G. Marks, Isaiah George Marks, and Annie Norse Marks, here at their house in Chico, either not 5th and Olive or 5th and Orient. I think they bounced to both of those corners there and lived at both in the first 10 years in Chico. Again, Anna just sitting on her house there, I believe at 5th and Olive. And again, it's so interesting to see, of course, the fashion and clothing that people are wearing here some 120 years ago. Anna now is just a young person. She finished all but 1 year of high school there at Santa Ana, and now she's come to Chico as a 17, 18-year-old, and she's going to finish high school here, and we'll see that in a minute. But she began to take snapshots. And here's a great picture right here, an illustration of life here in the early 1900s. It's wash day. And look at that face of Anna. This is not fun. And she's out there washing and hanging up the clothes to dry. Some of us, probably most of us right here in this room now, can remember about that real challenge and task, huge task of washing and ironing clothing, drying it. It was a big deal. You might have a clothes washer back in the 1950s. The dryer, And so again, here we see Anna wash day. And her mother, needlework. Needlework. This is before clothing is industrially produced. And so this was a woman's job, making, mending clothing, embroidery, and creating the little flare of decoration on the clothing. You can see little bits of decoration on her dress. That's probably not just machine put on there. You make it, you sew it on. When it comes off or frays or rips, you got to mend it. And so here's Mother on the porch taking care of business. Yes, Anna had completed her 2 years of high school in Santa Ana, and now she will finish her high school right here in Chico. And she took this picture of the first Chico High School building, completed in 1904. And here in 1905, Anna will graduate from Chico High. Where was this building? It's in shouting distance of where we are now, right down what used to be First Street, right down to where the Chico State Merriam Library is located. That building once stood right on First Street. You see it out in front there with the railroad track still showing there. So again, Chico voters, probably all men, of course, at that time, had disapproved twice a bond issue to build a high school and fund a high school curriculum for Chico. Twice in the late 1800s, the voters had said, no, we need those young men out on the farms. We don't want them going to school. But finally, in 1902, a bond issue did pass. For, I think, 2 to 3 years, the first high school here in Chico would be held on the 3rd floor of the old Oakdale Elementary School. And we'll see a picture of that later on. But now the new building is finished, and Anna will finish up her high school in this building. And I love that picture on the right. There she is, sitting on the front steps of the high school building with the physics class at Chico High. And in a beautiful Anna Mark scrapbook, where Anna glued in little tidbits and mementos of her earliest life, there was a little scrap of paper where some rascal boy had written on there, "To Anna Marks, the most popular girl in the physics class." Again, 1905, Anna would graduate from Chico High. 6 students in that graduating class. There's Anna there, along with Ellen Stansberry, who would go on to have a wonderful career as a teacher here in Chico at Chico High School. Beautiful picture here, Thanksgiving Day, 1905. Chico High School is playing Chico Normal, the college, and they're battling it out, and I believe Chico High won this particular game, although they would lose several following there to the normal school. But look at that picture. Talk about an evolution of sport that today we can see it's just so different, and yet a lot the same. 11 players, there they are lined up. Again, playing on a field that really was positioned between the 2 buildings there. The normal school, which was located where today's Kendall Hall is located. And then just a little to the west, the Chico High School building there, where the Merriam Library is now. And in between was this playing field, a general playing field. There were tennis courts, I believe, and so that's where the game is being played. Again, I struggled with organizing and and I determined not to do a chronological organization for these pictures. But again, here is a picture from 1911. It's July 4th. 1911, and the Diamond Match Company has swept into Chico 1903, 4, 5, 6, and 7. By 1907, the new diamond plant is in place in South Chico, the match factory, and a number of other big industrial buildings. Diamond's plan all along was to build a railroad between its Chico mill site and its manufacturing plant here in South Chico, right up through Paradise, through Magalia, and to the new state-of-the-art diamond match mill at Sterling City. There was no Sterling City before. This was a community created by Diamond Match for its new mill site, and by 1907-8, the railroad was in place. And so now 1911, Diamond has offered a day, an event, riding flat cars from Chico up to Sterling City to enjoy a lunch there at the mill site and to have a tour of the community and the mill. So look at that. How could we even possibly think of doing that today? Open flat cars? I don't know. Again, another good picture. 1908. Picnic grounds. Big Chico Creek. Where is that? Well, I'm not sure really, but I'm going to guess that. Remember John Bidwell had died in 1900? When he passed away, both he and Annie were deeply in debt. Annie had to set out to sell off a good part of their old Rancho Chico lands. By 1905, Annie had done that, extinguished the debt, and now she would have enough money for herself for the rest of her life. In 1905, then, debt-free, Annie gives the first 1,800 acres of the old Rancho Chico, right along Chico Creek, to the city of Chico for a park. And I'm going to guess this is the 1 mile right here. The 1 mile, of course, had been an events place even during the Bidwell era. But now, before the development that's happened there now, the walkways and the benches and the barbecue pits and the lighting and the bathhouses, all of that, we get a little glimpse of the beautiful natural features of Bidwell Park. Here's an event that we'll see a number of pictures by Anna. The Fiesta Arbora, May 3rd and 4th, 1912, right here on the streets of Chico. My father would often tell me how in the days before the automobile, or at least in the days before World War II, parades were big in Chico. It took very little for some organization to organize and promote a parade, and the town would come out. The entertainment options that were there were much different in those days. No motion pictures in your homes. And so again, people came out as a community event. And here was the Fiesta Arbora. What was that? It was a celebration of the tree world, a spring celebration really featuring trees and planting trees here in Chico. But here again we get a glimpse of that parade. There's the beautiful steam-powered fire engine on that upper right. The city still has that, and it's been beautifully restored. Steam-powered. Again, the city trustees and marshals riding through town on horses and wagons. Right down Main Street, here it is again. And of course, I was struck here, right between 3rd and 4th Streets. There's a residential house there. Wow, okay. Again, it was a big production, as you can see, with hundreds of people taking part, and you can see spectators lining the street there. The Auditorium Hotel, you can see that big 3-story building there. Once stood right on the corner of 3rd and Main. The Auditorium Hotel, later the Butte Hotel. Again, Chico had 3 or 4 big hotels right in the downtown. Where was all of that? Right here today. You see the street scene between 3rd and 4th, and looking there to the east and north there with that intersection at the far left, 3rd and Main Street, where that Auditorium Hotel had been. Again, 2 last pictures, but look at that. I like that. Queen Chico, the perfect city. And so I would guess that there maybe is a single queen selected for this event, and she's riding in the parade here with that signage. After the parade, people gathered in the city plaza here just as a community connectivity, celebrating the event and the spring day. We can see those elm trees that John Bidwell himself had planted in the plaza about in the 1860s, I believe. And now they must be about 50 years old. We'll see later in the program a time in the 50s when they had to be severely pruned, and that would begin their real demise. And it would take this picture, 1912, the city has completed its new municipal building. Right there at 5th and Main Street, it's just been completed, and Anna would take that picture there. And of course, the building is still in place there. Originally, again, the new signage there that we are seeing now more and more out on the streets of downtown, giving us some historic connotation for individual buildings, really championed and put in place by Chico Heritage Association. This one tells us a little bit about the earlier City Hall, only a block away from this one, and then this new one in 1911 and 12, and then the coming of the new Fred Davis Municipal Center. You can see it to the rear there. And yes, I do remember how there was a suggestion by some that at that point, the new building is completed, let's sell the old one. But fortunately, a number of people, some important city council people, said no. No, this is part of Chico. It should remain as such. Again, a few pictures here from those albums. Anna now is out of high school, and she's got a real group of friends that she will show as we look through her pictures and her life. She always had quite a group of people around her. I think this one on the right side here, 1915, that's Anna again at either, I'm going to say it's probably 5th and Olive. And I think what you're looking right across an open field there, that residential area that's now been completely built out. You can see there are open grounds there, and I think you're seeing the buildings along Flume Street there, the Chinese Old Town right there. Here's a great picture, and I want to spend a little time with this. Look at that, my first driving lesson. And it said that Anna was the first woman to receive a driver's license in Chico, 1913. And of course, you can see in this picture, I think something that I'm going to touch on here and several additional images. The car, the coming of this car culture, the coming of the automobile, and the change it brought to American culture. And of course, here are people that grew up before the car and grew up with horses pulling wagons and carriages and buggies. And if you wanted to go somewhere and you didn't want to walk, you had to go out and feed and water your horse and put all of the strappage and tack on it and hook it up to your wagon or buggy. And then, of course, the speed with which you could travel was barely more than what you could walk. So again, that's a great picture. Bounce back to just before 1908. Here's Anna. In 3 out of those 4 pictures, you can see these young women. They've stepped out of the 19th century and now are dressing in a new era, especially lower right there, the 2 bottom pictures. A new look with clothing, but they're still really getting around on horses, with horses and wagons. All of them now have been born back in the late 1800s. They grew up in a world that really counted on horses and wheeled buggies and carriages and wagons to really transport and move people and things. And now they're going to step into a giant change. Here's a great picture. Look at that. There's Anna sitting in the buggy there in the middle. But I just love that person on the right there with that hat. Again, 1913. Her one notation on this picture, Jonesy. I don't know who Jonesy was, but 1913 people are still riding horses around the streets of Chico. And you can see looking down the street there's wagons out there, not cars, but wagons. And my dad would often tell me the story of my father's uncle, Uncle Frank Bell, who had been born 1871 along the old Humboldt Road. He would come down with his family and secure the Bell Ranch properties out west of Chico. Along came the car, and Frank, of course, had lived his whole life with horses and mules and cows and wagons. Frank bought a new car in the 1920s, but he was so frustrated with it and so put off by it that he parked it in the barn and never drove it again. And he would drive his wagon into Chico all the way to his death in 1935. Again, the Anna pictures again give us a glimpse of the world before machine-powered equipment. Almond trees. How do you get the nuts off the almonds? You had to knock them. You might take a big mallet and hit the trunk. You'd use a big pole and reach up into the branches and jiggle things around. You spread out your canvas sheets down below. The nuts would fall down on the sheet, and then you could kind of collect them there in a pile. Of course, today you got a big machine that drives right up to the tree, reaches out with some jaws, takes a hold of the trunk, shakes it, and down the nuts come. You got sweepers that drive up and down the rows, picking up the nuts, highly mechanized. California, of course, has led the way. Anna would begin her working career about here, 1915. She's about 30. I believe she worked here at Griffin's Grocery. I don't have a location for this, but I'm sure it was right here in downtown. And here we can glimpse a time before the supermarket, where if you wanted to go to a grocery store, you would go in with a list of things you wanted. You would give the list to the grocer or his clerk, and the grocer or clerk would go to the shelves and pick out the things for you, bring it back to the counter, weigh things out, and come up with a bill. Again, the first supermarket is still 25 years away. One of the first supermarkets on the West Coast, right here in Chico, the Miller's Market. Right there just across the street from where the farmer's market is now held each Saturday. I like Anna's pictures of the outdoor world, and there's lots of them. Anna seemed to like the outdoor world. Look at Big Chico Creek here and the banks. Now we can look at the banks of the creek and see how they've been covered by invasive plants, ivy and vinca, creek in its more natural state. And again, into the upper park, you can see that page on the right, Iron Canyon, the upper Bidwell Park. Again, look at this picture. Here's Anna's young friend, Lita Stearns, sitting along Chico Creek with Anna's brother, James Harvey. They called him Harvey. And dog Jack, who is in several of these pictures here. But look how this young person is dressed. And what is she really doing there? Again, contemplating, relaxing, looking for some connection there with Chico Creek and the world around. Again, some more pictures of going into Upper Bidwell Park in a wagon with horses pulling you. There are several of these, I think 3 different days there when they took wagons up into the park. Here's a good one right here. Look across the top of the wagon itself. Look at that hillside there. I'm going to try to compare that in a minute. I've got one more picture here. From that very spot, from this very spot, you can step over to the edge of Iron Canyon and look right down into Chico Creek and look right across the canyon, and here's what you would have seen. This picture on the left. The old Sierra Lumber Company flume was still in place there. It had been built in 1872, completed 74 at Chico Meadows. The mill, the flume really had its beginning there at the mill site. The Sierra Lumber Company had at Chico Meadows, 30 miles upstream on Chico Creek from the site we're looking at here, Bidwell Park, 30 miles upstream to Chico Meadows. The flume came all the way down, bringing rough-cut lumber down to the mills here in Chico. And again, this was a big deal in Chico's story. It gave, as Old Hutch would call it, this all gave Chico an industrial base for its economy. And it really, really elevated Chico above other valley towns of smaller stature. Again, the mill was in place here in 1907 when Anna took this picture. And then you see over on the right, just 6 years later, 1913, you can see the flume down on the ground. It's no longer standing. What happened there? Well, Sierra Lumber, Old Hutch would call it the world's biggest lumber company in its heyday. By the early 1900s, Sierra is fading. Its abilities to get into the forest using oxen and people power and steam winches to move trees had run out there. They could no longer really find new forests to cut. So Sierra, first of all, suffers a gigantic fire in 1903 right here in Chico to its mill, and now they're ready to sell out to Diamond. They will do that. 1904, 5, and 6, Sierra sells its lands to Diamond Match, and Diamond Match has got a whole new era of logging with railroads, and they say, we're not going to use the flume. We don't want it. If anybody wants to go and take wood out of the flume, go for it. And so we're told that that's what happened. A number of people would go wherever they could get to the flume and tear it down. And of course there was beautiful old growth, first growth wood in that flume. And so a lot of wood came out of the flume, and several buildings here in Chico were said to have been built with the flume wood. Again, here's those three pictures. There's the flume on the left. There's that wagon picture. And there's the picture I took just, I think, 3 or 4 days ago, standing kind of in the same place. In the picture on the upper left, the flume running down, you can see it going behind that very distinctive big rock. And Andy Mark and his wife Jill, who did considerable work and authored 2 books on Sierra Lumber Company that we have, they would name that rock the Wedge. And it does look like the Wedge. Right here on the right, on my picture just several days ago, that Wedge rock, you just can't quite see it there. It's right above the trees. And look at those rascal trees have grown up and camouflaged the wedge, but it's right there. And I've been down below the lip of the basalt across the canyon there where the flume used to run, and you can find oodles of square nails still in through there, and a few boards that are badly weathered but somewhat protected by rocks or shading from the flume era. Again, Anna and her friends would recreate in the flume, but again, just a great picture of how that flume was built there. Look at that. The flume was not made to float logs down, but instead, the logs would be milled up at the mill site at Chico Meadows, and then those rough cut boards would be floated down the flume to Chico, where they would be used to make doors and windows and boxes and all things wood products. And you can see Anna sitting in the flume there on the right with her camera, and you can see Jack the dog right in there along and enjoying the adventure. One of the things I really found interesting in these Anna Mark's pictures were pictures of snow. And again, here's 1913, after a snowstorm. Look at that. There's the city plaza you see there on the right. Snow, Broadway covered with snow. From that same storm, the grounds right in front of the State Normal building there, today's Chico State, a lot of snow. Just, 11 years later, after a snowstorm, 1924, 5 Mile Dam. There's Anna standing at the 5 Mile, with Chico Creek coming right toward us, and Lindo Channel, of course, leaving Chico Creek, and right there to the left there behind that snowbank. But again, a lot of snow. You can see across there the development at the 5 Mile. You can see here there's some benches or seats and some towel racks over there. So again, the 5 Mile Dam. Here's the city plaza after that 1924 snowstorm. 1929, near 1 Mile Dam. And her 2 friends, Robert and Dorothy Shell. We're going to see those 2 young people here again. But again, I find it intriguing. I remember one snowstorm there in the 1950s when I was a boy that really put quite a blanket of snow on the ground here in Chico. Since then, it's just been a little snow flurry. Maybe a little bit of snow begins to collect on the ground, but not much. Today we hardly ever see it. Now we can wonder about, well, is that just the eternal vagaries of weather? Yeah, it's always changing, always different. Is that because of some warming planet and a changing climate? Which personally I subscribe to. And so again, it's interesting to see here how snow was once, something that happened periodically here in Chico. the hooker oak. Of course, I like this picture here. It shows the hooker oak in 24. Anna has a relative visiting from the east, and they take the relative, Aunt Gertie, out to see the hooker oak. And there you can see that big tree there in that left-hand photo. And then I just love that picture upper right. I think it really expresses to me maybe the place that the hooker oak had in Chico at that time. Even into my own time, the hooker oak held some near sacred place in Chico's storyline. It seemed to be the expression of the fertility of the Chico area and the strength of its soil and its climate and its water. This wonderful combination of growing things here. A long growing season, available surface, and right below the surface, subsurface water that trees could get to, and the soil quality itself. And so look at how those people are dressed to go out to see the hooker oak. Was this after church, maybe? Maybe. And yet, again, you can see it was a real festive moment there to go out and see the big tree. Unfortunately, 1977, a big windstorm in the springtime blew down hooker oak. Some of us remember that. And then, interestingly enough, the tree had been called the biggest oak tree in the world. When the tree blew over, and it was finally, after 2 years, cut up, and cutting right through the trunk, it turned out to be 2 trees that actually had been 2 saplings starting out real close together, and in time just growing together into one trunk. Eventually, Anna's family would build this house on Creek Drive, today's Bidwell Avenue, downstream from where Nord Avenue and Walnut cross Big Chico there at the old Paisan Pizza location there. And so, again, I talked to a person who is living there today and helped renovate the house to what we see there on the right. And he would tell me this had been the location of the Bidwell Dairy during the Rancho Chico days. And you can see that barn there on the left. I'm going to guess in 1915, I believe, when this house was completed, that the future very much was with automobiles and no longer with horses and the need to have a barn on your property. And I'm going to guess this was a barn dating back to that Bidwell era and the Bidwell Dairy. Come on. In about 1910, 11, and 12, the Marx family, there were 6 of them. They purchased a cabin in Butte Meadows, and they began to use the old Humboldt Road to go up to their cabin at Butte Meadows. So we're going to see several pictures about that. Look at this great picture, the Butte Meadows Improvement Club. We heard from the family that early on, every trip and every stay up to Butte Meadows would bring at least a short work session where everybody along would go out to the Humboldt Road and help to rake rocks off the road. Again, this is before we've got a public works department, before paving of roads and hired employees to improve our own personal comfort and ease in driving these new roadways, this new era of cars. And so people will take it upon themselves to lend to the improvement of their own time in driving these roads. Here's the Marx family out on their porch. There's Reba sitting on the porch on the left. She would be the first child born to IG and Annie. Then there would be Anna, and then 3 or 4 boys. There was, oh no, George, Will, and James Harvey. So there were 5 children. Reba, Anna, George, Will, and James Harvey. So in this picture on the left, there's Reba, then James Harvey, and I believe that's George there. In the back, again, a visiting uncle from the east, Uncle John. There's Mama in the middle, Annie Norris Marks and IG Marks on the right. They're sitting on their porch. And most of us here of a certain age there, like me, remember the times of going to the mountains, of having a retreat out of the valley, and the fearsome Chico summers. And people love to go up to the mountains and sit outside. And again, I think a connection with the natural world that happened through all of that, a lot of that's gone now. And here on the right, we can see again Father IG Marks, who would come here to Chico to be a bookkeeper and clerk for the new plant introduction station that the federal government was putting into place in South Chico. A federal test site to see what plants would grow in the Chico and the California environment. And so he would come here for that. He would later go into insurance and real estate, and there would be 3 generations of the Marks family carrying on that Marks insurance there that would come all the way down to a point when they had that beautiful building right there on Valambrosia where today's Morning Thunder is. They would have the Marks insurance company there for a while. Again, Anna and her brother, Anna and her sister and a friend. Again, this going to the mountains became a big part of their life. Here was that picture, that very first picture that we found as we opened the first Anna Marks photo album. The old county seat grade on the old Humboldt Road on the way to Butte Meadows. And look at that car, look at that road, look at those kids sitting there on that rock there to the right of the car. And again, you can see that roadway is pretty well used. It's unpaved, certainly. This is 1922. The car era is now really beginning to take shape. And of course, the county seat grade. What was that all about? Well, again, John Bidwell had been the primary investor in putting the first Humboldt wagon road into place in the 1860s. Then, and that first road, of course, just followed the trail system that was probably already there, following the contour of the land. By 1877, Bidwell would invest here in improving the road with a new grade right here for about a mile, where he had a crew of people he hired to go up and now create this new little part of the Humboldt Road that would give you a more controlled and even grade. Instead of up and down, around and around. He actually had people here moving big rocks, building up the edges of the roadway. And this happened right at the point, 1877, where Chico is locked in its first, I think, of several efforts to take the county seat away from Oroville and move it to Chico. Oroville is a fading mining town. Chico is a growing agricultural and railroad and educational center. And so Bidwell and others, many others, want to see the county seat moved here to Chico. Bidwell hires this crew to go up and make this new section of the road, but he tells them, all right, I'll hire you, but when the vote comes for the county seat, I want you to vote for Chico. Well, that somehow leaked out, and all those votes were discounted. And that first vote was pretty close, but it went to Oroville, as did the several that followed. Again, that place is still here today. You can see there, upper left, that first picture we were looking at. There, that same rock combination, now a part of Bidwell Park. You can access that off of Highway 32 and walk about a mile right along that old roadway that's still there. It's all overgrown now, but a trail runs right up it. And so I walked in to take a picture of the rocks. And back here on that lower left, you can see my car there that I parked. That's about a mile back to the west of the location for the county seat grade rock. But look, you can look right down the old section of one of the permutations of the Humboldt Road, Highway 32. You can see how that followed just the rocky contour of the land, and then off to the right, today's high speed, 80 miles an hour if you want to drive out there. That had been put in place with the state of California's major renovation of the old Humboldt Road in the 1960s and into the 70s. Again, I want to just comment here, because I think here, 1930s, here's again quite an expedition headed off for Butte Meadows. And we can again, I think, see in the exhilaration of these people there, the thrill of the automobile. The automobile would have to be one of the most profound changes in the 20th century. Here's just a little bit about the automobile. The first internal combustion engine approximating the design of what we are still using today was finally put into place in Germany about 1885 by two German engineers after about 100 years of development and tinkering with an engine that would burn some fuel and create some kind of harnessed power. 1885, they finally have an engine design that's going to work. The first cars begin to appear. 1897, the first car is built and driven on the streets of Los Angeles. And they drive the car out of its little construction shed before dawn, so not to frighten any horses that might be out on the street. 1897. 7 years later, 1904, there would be 1,500 automobiles in Los Angeles County. 10 years later, 55,000 cars in Los Angeles County. It would have the highest per capita car ownership and use of any place in the world. And this car culture that sprung up around the automobile found its ideal infancy and growing place right here in California. There would be no other place on planet Earth that could show a more complete and more profound story about the coming of the car. Not only the machine itself, not only the mechanical car, but the impact on people and the building of a lifestyle and a culture around the automobile. Consider, you grew up, you were born in a time if you wanted to go to town 3 miles away, you had to hitch up your horse and ride in there. And now you can do it in minutes. And it reshapes your whole mental thinking about the day and what you're going to do and what you can do what you can do. And I would say that the impact of the car on our own individual character is really profound in releasing the individual to create their own lifestyle. You're not so locked in to the group, a movement, and the group goings and comings there. Now you've got this car, and you can really circulate about on your own, by yourself, quickly. So again, I think you can really see that. The old Humboldt Road still unpaved. Again, these three pictures of the bridge right over Butte Creek in Butte Meadows. The bridge is still right there, located at the same spot. But look at that upper left. There's the bridge that had been constructed for the Humboldt Wagon Road. In our book on the Humboldt Road, Marty and I have a picture of the workers building that first bridge. And look at it. It's just logs going across between the two abutments, and then, of course, a wooden support structure. And then again, in 1935, there's Anna and some friends back up at Butte Meadows. A new bridge is in place. Again, just again an appreciation, a recognition of this movement through the 20th century, the development of the car culture there, and now the need for public support and public building with paid employment there to put this all into place. Again, Anna would take this picture in 1911, showing still, at that point in time, there were still freight teams in Butte Meadows there. And of course, this is the way the Humboldt Road had been put into place for, teaming like this, and individual wagons traveling. Anna would take this picture of Jonesville, above Butte Meadows, what, 5-6 miles? This had been a stopping place for the old Humboldt Road. And you could come here and spend the night, rent a room, get food, maybe even if you wanted, you could change teams there for the long pull up and over the Humboldt summit and down into Big Meadows, today's Lake Almanor. So again, Anna would take this great picture. The museum has had a great event here at Jonesville in the last couple of years. I'm hoping that we can go back up here this summer. That's the only real building still in place along the old Humboldt Road. Again, Anna would take this picture of Fern Stevens, the daughter of the husband and wife who were managing the old hotel there in we'll say 1910, can't remember. But again, you can see Fern standing on that rock right to the left of that left side picture. You can just see the little corner of the barn there at Jonesville. And then you can see it still there on the right. I've been told by Jonesville people that now they're going to restore the barn after completely restoring the old station itself. Here's a picture from Anna, 1919. The 5th hotel in Butte Meadows is going up. And look at that, 3 stories. There had been 4 previous hotels there in Butte Meadows, and each one of them consumed by fire. This one, 1919, the Roper Hotel, financed by the Roper family. This wouldn't even last 10 years before a wintertime fire and a plugged up fire, wood stove flue, started a fire here that completely destroyed the building. I believe the barn you see here on the right is probably a remnant of an earlier hotel right here at this same site here, where barns like that were put into place where you could drive your freight team right into the barn, and the barn could protect team and wagon overnight. Again, just a few scattered pictures over the years at Butte Meadows. You can see Anna really had a cluster of friends. They liked to go there for recreation, get out of Chico. The 1920s passed all the way into the 30s, and now Anna is probably in 50s. Now she's the one taking family and friends up to Butte Meadows. Chico Meadows right here on the upper left. In fact, both pictures, Chico Meadows, just a mile away from Butte Meadows. Again, recreation there at Butte Meadows, get out of town, rest, relax. 1942, Anna there at their cabin at Butte Meadows. She's got her brand new Buick that we see there. We're going to see one of the last pictures with her in her new car. But again, she was still going up there. Anna had a love life, or at least she probably wanted to. Look at that on the left. There's Anna holding hands with Henry Smith. And there in the middle, there they both are, up in the Upper Bidwell Park, 1924. Anna would be about, all right, so 24 and 16, that's 40. She's about 40 years old here. Here's Henry Smith over at the family house on today's Bidwell Drive. But really, it would be Mother here who would tell Anna, Anna, your sister Reba is married. Reba has the twins now. I, the mother, need you, Anna, to take care of me as I get old. And so again, most of us can remember this story from our earlier livelihood, our own grandmothers. And it was hard, and you had to have money in order to put an older person into some rest home, as they called it. And again, it was up to the family much more to take care of the aging adults. And so Anna would live her life giving to her mother that request there. And her mother would live until 1938, when she would pass away, and Anna would be 52. And so Anna would stay here at the family home until 1938-39, when her mother would pass away. Her father had already died in 1920, and now Anna would purchase a house right off the Esplanade on East Sacramento Avenue. Again, Anna would be a charter member for the Chico Women's Business Club. And here we can see the parade. On Armistice Day, 1930, down Broadway. And there's the Chico Women's Business Club float, which won the second prize for this event. I think you can see the downtown post office. There it is there on the far left, just the rooftop there by the plaza trees, the city plaza trees. Then the old Methodist Episcopal South Church that once stood right there on that corner of 6th and Broadway. There's that same shot today. You can see the post office down there, the gas station where the church was. And then, of course, I'm wondering, I don't really know, whether that building right there, which was once an automobile sale and showroom, whether that's the same building there and there, not sure. Kind of looks like it. Again, a few scattering pictures there of Anna continuing to circulate about with her friends. Look at that swinging bridge up at Richardson Springs. And I can remember going across that thing. It was quite a thrill and really fun. Had some wire along both sides there, so you really couldn't fall off, but it went across an incredible gorge there in Mud Creek. And then again up the Honey Run grade, 25. Again, Anna and her friends. Anna's single now, remember. She's single. Her friends are probably the core of her social life. They visit all kinds of places. I remember as a boy visiting the old mining sites in Butte County, and they were scattered all over. And you could go and see the remnants of buildings and mine shafts and ore carts and equipment still. My dad was interested in all of that, and we went a lot. So again, just a little glimpse of Anna going through time here. And finally here on the bottom and right side there, we're into the 30s and 40s there. Anna would go through this event. The only real pictures that show this big fire event right here within stone's throw of where we're sitting right now, the Presbyterian Church. The fire on the morning of February 13th, 1931. And the church, which had been completed in 1911, mostly with Annie Bidwell's money. Remember, the Presbyterian Church had its first church building at 4th and Broadway, where today's Waterland Breslauer building stands, and the Chico Paper Company right there on the corner. That was the location for a first very large church, but on a small lot, seating capacity limited, couldn't expand. So in 1910, the church sold that property and built the new one right over here. Just a stone's throw away, the Presbyterian Church. And again, Annie would pay for most of it. 1931, the church catches fire. At first it said, those walls are compromised. We can't rebuild using the same brick structure that survived the fire. But further examination and testing by engineers would show, yes, they're okay, we can rebuild. And so it took just a year for the church to rebuild and dedicate its new church there. And here on the right you see the trustees that oversaw that whole rebuilding process. And there's Anna, the only woman there, right front and center. She would take a picture of this. Chico's first real airport, the Patrick Field. And the private owner of this large agricultural ranch, Garrison Patrick, as a young man, he had an interest in, again, this incredible new technology. And it's just taking the world by storm. And so in 1930, when these two pictures are taken, it's quite a moment for a big new airplane to come in and the public to come out and see. And of course, it would be 5 years later that the city of Chico would purchase the first acreage out at today's municipal airport for the beginnings of the Chico airport. And then the Army would come in 1941 and expand that with the Chico Army Airfield and leave behind our current and modern, still pretty modern airport. Where was that? Right there in South Chico, right off the Midway and Hagen Lane at today's Glen Oak Cemetery there, the Patrick Field. And it would take these pictures of the crews of men putting that Northern Electric, Sacramento Northern Electric train that ran right here from Chico, where its northern headquarters was here. The railroad started here and went all the way to the Bay Area. Mostly a commuter passenger system, an electric train, oh my golly. And look at the crew here that put it together and the steam-powered pile driver that was used to put those pilings into place for the railroad bed. And there's Anna. Look at her. And look at that. Me and my new Buick with the underline underneath it. And again, most of us probably have felt this very thing. A new car? Oh, wow. a big deal in one's life. All right, I'm going to close this out with just a tidbit from the Anna Marks scrapbooks. Anna had her photo albums, and then as a young person, she began to keep scrapbooks where she would cut things out from newspapers. She would put in little mementos and announcements and death services. And so somewhere in the 1930s here, we see the Gaiety Club. What was that? Anna and her friends put together the Gaiety Girls, was the name of their club. And they would hold all kinds of events and get-togethers. And here they're holding and hosting an event for their mothers. And I just love that picture. It just so reminds me of my own grandmothers. Just the dress and the look and, yeah, the time period. All people had been born probably the middle of the 1800s and had lived most of their life in such a different world. Now, 1934. Here's what happened here at the old Oakdale School. Here's the Anna Marks scrapbook page on the left, talking about taking the bell out of the old Oakdale School. The Salem Street School had been Chico's first elementary school building, 1870. I'm not sure. But here on Oakdale, this was the second, 1875. Built right there where today's Chico Country Day School is located, right at the south end of downtown Chico. And now in 48, the bell is going to be taken out. Here in the center, we see that Oakdale building there in 1946. It's aged, it's not used anymore. They built several other school buildings on site right off to the right there that are now still being used, but the building itself is going to be demolished. And so the article tells us about the 1,500 pounds of pigeon poop that they had to take out of the tower there, and how they've got a buyer all lined up for all of that as fertilizer. So they're excited and a real plus to their demolition process. They talk about the bell. And you can see in the picture from Anna's article, the crane is lifting the bell out of the tower. And it talks about the bell in the article, how it had been made in 1876 with the inscription for the forgotten Mealy, anyway, the bell company back east. And it says Oakdale School, 1876. Well, what happened to that bell? It's still right here. It's hung up out in front of Fire Station number 2 over on East 5th Avenue. It's not really a fire bell. It was a school bell, and you can see on the bell there it is, the wordage listed in the article, and it does say Chico Public Schools, 1876. These two articles from Anna's scrapbook were good because, again, they rang a bell for me here in my own time here in Chico. The black walnut tree here on the left. Two articles about these aging and expanding black walnut trees. The article in the middle says it is estimated there are 5,000 black walnuts along the streets of Chico. They had been a very prominent and easy tree to plant along the streets. You just stuck a walnut into the ground and the things would pop up. A native plant to Chico or to California, brought here, I think, by Bidwell, and he had liked to plant them himself. So now they're causing problems. The branches need pruning, it costs money, they're lifting up the sidewalks, and the two captions below talk about how, these are not good street trees. And of course here the article on the right, the pruning of those downtown city plaza trees in 1948, 1952. And again, you can see the branches are being pruned, and the caption below says that the arbiter claims that, the trees will be fine, they'll just sprout back up. Well, that didn't really play out that way. The trees were injured, infection got into those branches, the infection spread, it compromised the trees somewhat. Really, what really spelled the end for them was their size and the fear of them falling, as one I believe did fall, and so that really led to the eventual taking out of those early trees and the redo of our present downtown plaza. Anna had had a very interesting work life. She had worked over 25 years for the Nichols Hardware Company. This was one of downtown Chico's most prominent businesses. You can see it there, upper left, right on the corner of 4th and Broadway, right where the Bank of America building is now. And I think that's what really brought Anna to cut out the article here. After the 1950 fire, and you see that there, destroyed the Nichols Hardware Company, then the Bank of America would come in and purchase that property and build their new downtown bank. Again, that picture on the lower left, again, a good picture. You can see the Nichols Hardware right to the left there on the left side, but it shows again the moment when that very decorative original exterior of the Moorhead building there was being removed. They're not adding on, they're taking all that off. And that's 1939. And it was felt that a modernization was the best. And so they stripped all of that off and left a very flat, bare exterior that went all the way down to just our last few years, when the Chico building champion, Wayne Cook, would really restore this building to what we have now, trying to really recreate what had been there before. Again, Anna had begun work for the Nichols Hardware in the 1920s and would work all the way through until the building was consumed by fire in 1950. Anna would become quite an authority and even a champion for the Native Americans, for the people that were here before, I like to call them. As a teenager, Anna had begun working with Annie Bidwell in this building here, the old church building on Sacramento Avenue that had been built by the Bidwells for the Mechoopda Native Americans that had been given this small little patch of ground called the Rancheria. And so again, Anna had worked with Annie Bidwell, as Annie Bidwell was really a person who gave church services here and who organized and conducted educational activities for these people that were here before, teaching them skills, English, sewing, skill sets that Annie Bidwell felt were valuable. Now, in 1956, Anna Marks is going to give this program. Some of us will find it interesting. Yeah, the Native Daughters of the Golden West. No, not the Native Daughters. The Daughters of the American Revolution are going to have their meeting at the Richardson Springs. Most of us who were here in '56 can remember that the Springs or the place for any kind of social event. Of course, that's all been lost. In this meeting here, the article tells us that Emma Cooper, and we see her picture here. Emma had been born before, I believe, the coming of the gold rush. She had grown up out on Rock Creek, but had come to live at the Chico Rancheria as a young person. And she would recall her earlier days and life as she knew it. And she would talk about here in the article how seeing Richardson Springs, Emma Cooper would say she had not seen that for so long, and it was just like a dream, she says, the new hotel building and the built-up Richardson Springs environment. Again, Anna, I think after the Nichols Hardware, would work for Sierra Tractor and finish out her work career here. We see another page from her scrapbook and an article that was there about her retirement. And I think that's it. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.